Now, I didn't expect to be doing another one of these so soon, but it is a bit ironic that the big thing in the news that's making it cycle now is the latest report from Bob Iger's book, basically his memoirs, where he mentions that Lucas was upset and betrayed about the sequel trilogy. It's crazy because as I mentioned in my last video, that's basically, in a lot of ways, I feel like why many of the fans are also feeling that same way. Let me really read his own words. What he says is that at some point in the process, George told me that he had completed outlines for 3 new movies. He agreed to send us 3 copies of the outline, one for me, one for Alan Breverman, and one for Alan Horn, who just been hired to run our studio. Alan Horn and I read George's outlines and decided we needed to buy them, though we made it clear in the purchase agreement that we would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plot lines he'd laid out. He knew that I was going to stand firm on the question of creative control, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to accept, so he reluctantly agreed to be available to consult with us at our request.
And what do you see your role as creative consultant? What does that mean?
I just said that I would back her up, and I would be there if and especially help him with the script and making sure the script sort of, there's a lot of blank spots in the story treatment that hopefully we can fill in. And
I think the incredible thing about George is, this is not like a series of books like Harry Potter where you've already got a template of what the stories might be. These are original stories and original ideas that come out of a world that essentially is in George's head. So the beauty of the collaboration that can continue is as we work our way through these scripts, if we're sitting and saying, I wonder if this character can do that, or does this make sense within the rules of Star Wars? That really, he's the keeper of the flame when it comes to that.
It's the same thing with the first 3 films. That's all my job is to be the keeper of the flame.
I promised that we would be open to his ideas. This was not a hard promise to make. Of course we'd be open to George Lucas's ideas. But like the outlines, we would be under no obligation. Iger then details a meeting with Lucas, the screenwriter, and Kathleen Kennedy at the Skywalker Ranch to talk about their ideas for the film.
But I felt that I really wanted to put the company somewhere in a larger entity which would protect it.
Given the tremendous success that Disney's had with Marvel and with Pixar, and now adding Lucasfilm to that, I think we couldn't be at a better home.
I always said I wasn't going to do any more, and that's true, because I'm not going to do any more. But that doesn't mean I'm unwilling to turn it over to Kathy to do more. Mm-hmm. I have story treatments of 7, 8, and 9, and a bunch of other movies, and obviously we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So, I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
We are absolutely going to make Star Wars movies, and we're in the midst of the really fun part of the process, which is we're sitting down with a couple of writers and we're starting to discuss ideas and we're starting to talk about what those stories might be. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be entirely on my own, because it's important that he at least continue to be the little guardian angel on my shoulder, helping me do this.
They're finishing the hologram now. Don't worry.
My Yoda has to be there.
He notes, George immediately got upset as we began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that we weren't using one of the stories he submitted during negotiations, Iger recalls. The truth was, Kathy, JJ, Alan, and I discussed the direction with the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. George knew we weren't contractually bound to anything.
It's a very big universe I've created, and there's a lot of stories that are sitting in there.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
But he thought that our buying the story treatments was a tacit promise that we'd follow them, and he was disappointed that his story was being discarded. I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way.
I feel completely confident that Disney, will take good care of the franchise I've built. And Kathy and I have been working on future Star Wars films, and the main reason I brought Kathy on is rather than quit, I wanted to have it move forward, but I needed somebody I trusted who could take that franchise and make it work the way I intended it to.
I don't think I had now, but I could have handled it better. I should have prepared him for the meeting with JJ and Michael and told him about our conversations and that we felt it was better to go in another direction. I could have talked this through with him and possibly avoided angering him by not surprising him. Now, in the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed, and while this whole process would have never been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start.
You can't. These are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are my. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
And
sell
you
them
sold
off.
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and.
Okay, but having said all that and having talked to you.
Now, then what's crazy about this is that it fits with how I feel many fans feel when it comes to especially what happened in The Last Jedi. And that's what it kind of comes down to. There's a level of respect. Obviously, if they had gone with George Lucas's ideas and maybe they weren't good or they don't translate, fans would have been, I think, more forgiving. And if nothing else, the fans would have lived with it. Like, I think that's the biggest difference here is that, fans would have then said, hey, Disney, okay, take it in your direction, because what we saw, it wasn't what we were looking for. And Disney would have had the control. Now, Disney deciding to not do that put all the pressure on Disney to come up with something better. And that was the craziest thing. When they talk about, I think we may have maybe possibly misled him, I don't know. No, it was clear. Like, look at the interviews.
So once Kathy came on board, we started working with writers and started working on all the processes of doing the films. So we've, got a plan for 7, 8, and 9, which is the end of the trilogy.
Now we can. George seems to be under the impression that he's going to be consulted. George seems to be under the impression that his scripts are going to be used, maybe modified. But this seems like in planning for this sale, he believed that he was still going to be closely involved and kind of a caretaker to kind of still have a large amount of input on what actually happens and what's done with his product. And that's probably why he made the comment about the white slavers and the negative feedback that he's had with both movies, from him saying that The Force Awakens wasn't that creative and they didn't do anything new and all those kind of things, to how he said when it came to The Last Jedi that it was more or less technically well done, and that was about as good a compliment as he gave the movie. So it's just sad, I think, but I think this goes to my point. This exemplifies the issue with where the fan base is, because not only did George Lucas's trilogy, because it is his trilogy, and he had the final three movies, instead of ending this trilogy and allowing him to end it, or even adapting his ending, they literally threw those out, but they threw it out without bringing in an actual plan. Like, there is plenty of information, plenty of news that suggests there really wasn't a plan, and you just watch the movies and you can see how it just was completely disjointed from JJ's vision of 7 to Ryan Johnson's vision of 8, and probably how JJ's vision of 9 is going to be. It just, it feels like a disconnected, like it wasn't well planned out, and it doesn't seem that it actually was, which is the saddest thing. If George already had 3 movies planned and he actually had a conclusion to the trilogy, to throw that out for no plan, to kind of wing it from director to director to finish it, is just such a sad thing. And I think fans have a right to be upset for George Lucas, and upset that the promises of caretaking his characters and keeping the world true to them, and the prospect of seeing them all together, and all these things that they kind of suggested Disney sold not only George Lucas but also us on, turned out to be basically lies. Turned out to be like, oops, we accidentally misled you. We never committed to anything. We just made it seem like it was so you'd sell it to us, and then we changed our mind conveniently. Yikes. Oh, and by the way, we just so happen to now own your scripts for at least the treatments for the story for 7, 8, and 9. So even if you wanted to make your own version of another sci-fi similar to Star Wars, just to finish it, the trilogy as you intended, well, I guess you can't do that either. Whoopsie. Did I do that?